chorus then hits you with an A, the 1 of A minor. Going to the major. Giving some movement without totally sounding like it's ready to pull you elsewhere by going to the flat 4, which is a D minor in this case. Before holding on that A to the second repeat of the chorus. In the last two measures, we have a movement from the 5 to the flat 6 to the flat 7, a crescendo that allows the end of the chorus to build and build before exploding into the next dissonant part. Taking a look at Tarja's lead lines, we can see that the strong notes, or the notes that are held, are typically chord tones within the underlying implied chord by the bass and the guitar. Here we have an F, which is a flat third up from the D. And then when we return to the 1 on the 4th measure of the chorus, we also have Tarja hitting the 5 of that chord, which in this case would be a C, because the one underneath that, the 1 of the scale, is an A. This is a great way of making something sound triumphant and like it has movement, even if you're going back to the literal 1 of the key, like is done here. A couple super specific things I wanted to point out real fast is how Tarja is changing up her vocals in the second repeat of the chorus. While this part's notated kind of weirdly, so I'm not going to discuss it, I do want to discuss this section. Here we see the guitar returning to the F, but now, for the second part of the chorus, we generally observe Tarja following a similar approach, but at the same time changing up a couple chord tones within what she plays to make things sound different. For example, on the part going back to the triumphant thing when using the 5th note of a chord, we can see that Tarja is utilizing this D right here, which is the 5th of the G being played down here. So not only are you pulling towards the next part of the song by playing the flat 7 underneath the vocals are playing the 5th of the flat 7 to really underscore the triumph and the awesomeness, shall we say, of the section. We then get into a heavy dissonant part that is reminiscent of the intro of the song. Here we find ourselves utilizing the Phrygian mode once again, E Phrygian, just like the beginning of the song. We then have the mosh part. Hitting this very grindy sounding F sharp along with A sharp in order to add some of that chromatic darkness to the situation. Also utilizing a shorter time signature of 2/4 just to make things sound that little bit more off. This section right here, I would argue is being in the key of A minor, primarily because of the vocals and what most of the rhythm is doing. However, we are pulling from this D sharp right here to give you that feel of being in E harmonic minor more so than E minor natural. Using that D sharp makes things sound very dark on measure 75. After this part, we get into the orchestral instrumental section. For the first part of this instrumental section, I would argue that it's in the key of D flat minor. This is primarily because the bass and the guitar, respectively, are playing chords pretty much entirely revolving around that chord. The lead line is also revolving around Ds, as can be seen here. From there, we switch back to the key of E minor to continue the instrumental section, with glorious angelic vocals reigning through the whole time, just not a Guitar Pro, of course. Here we can observe what would be E minor in second inversion because the 5th is on the bottom, which lends credence to the idea that this part is in E minor. And then what is essentially a B power chord with the vocals that utilizes the E as the 5th, before returning to the E minor in second inversion here. Everything kind of descends before the glorious return to the chorus. So while there's a lot happening here, from what I can tell, it looks like the orchestral lines in this section anyways are pretty closely following what the rhythm guitar and bass are doing, but that will change for the repeat of the second chorus. And then as the first part of the second chorus finally ends, we get into the awesome key change that is the second part of the second chorus. After looking at things, I think the best way to describe the key change here would be a transposition from A minor to B minor, which is a major second on the circle of fifths forward, going clockwise, as shown by the two sharps right here, as well as the guitar and the bass kind of revolving around the B note. Similar movements of moving from the 1 to the flat 7 and so on like that still apply here, as well as the buildup, which goes from the flat 6 to the flat 7. As for the orchestral stuff, there's certainly a lot going down here, so let's take a look at that. We do observe what is essentially an outlining of the B minor chord right here, and here as well, in fact, with this outlining of the chord tone following an outline of the E minor chord when it comes up. Then transitioning to an outlining of G when the G chord comes up in most spots of the lead line, from what I can tell. Though it looks like here on this little bit it does change to an E but continues the G, and that would actually work because those chords are very closely related. Now when he transitions to the flat 6, which is the A, so then eventually he gets to the flat 6 on the second to last bar of the chorus, and it looks like once again he's outlining that flat 6 elsewhere in every part from what I can tell. And then he moves to the flat 7, which is the A here, and he starts outlining A's. So it looks like the vast majority of the time here he is simply outlining the chords as implied by the bass and the guitar with the orchestral elements, barring a couple exceptions, like for example the really cool horn part here, where in that case an A is being played, which would be the flat 7. He's kind of outlining an A here, sort of, but sort of just sequencing too. The vast majority of this passage right here, all of the crazy orchestral stuff, is outlining the chords implied by the bass and guitar, using chord tones, typically the 3 notes of the triad, in order to make things sound really awesome and crazy. That's great news for anyone wanting to make stuff like this if you know what your chords are, which you know you probably would, and can make a triad out of that. You can move that triad around anywhere you want to. You can, on higher octaves or elsewhere, simply play that triad with a guitar, violins, whatever you want, in certain sequences, in certain patterns, as he's doing here, in order to make things sound very interesting and complex. We can observe, along with the guitar and the bass, which is not shown here, he has stuff happening around the middle C area here. That's Tarja singing a little bit above, in between C4 and C5 right here too. But he also has things happening around the C6 area. That's up in here. So he's basically filling up ranges of the octaves with his triads here. The triads being implied by the underlying chords of the bass and the guitar. A great yet very condensed, I don't want to say simple, but elegant and efficient way to make a song sound very complicated and interesting without doing anything crazy to make something really, really different. And then we need to, of course, finish out the song. The song ends very triumphantly on the G, which almost makes me want to call it as being the 1 of G major. And the reason that it sounds so major is because right here, as an orchestral hit, he is playing that major third of G, or the B. So it makes it sound unequivocally major, even though the rest of this stuff looks like he's also playing that B right here, very high up. Had to check that, ending on an unequivocally major and triumphant sound. I think it makes sense to end on this G major because even when it's playing E Phrygian, if it was not Phrygian and was E minor, the G major is the parallel major of E minor, so ending here makes a lot of sense. Everything's kind of revolving around the E, whether it's E Phrygian or E minor. Ending on the G major makes sense if you want a major sound for this, which he did. I hope you enjoyed that walkthrough of Dark Chest of Wonders by Nightwish. If you could please like and subscribe, I'd very much appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of the song too, man. Did I get anything wrong? What could I improve in my interpretations? What did you think of the song itself? Let me know. I want to hear about it. And until next time, I'll see you right here on The Spike Signal.